Well, we've gathered today here and from our homes on this Memorial Day weekend, a weekend that has become the unofficial beginning of summer, when schools close and pools open, the first big weekend of the vacation season, and not a great time to be on the roads. But this was a national holiday intended to remember those who have died in military service. And it actually originated after the American Civil War in 1868 and was first known as Decoration Day, when an organization of Union veterans established a time for the nation to decorate the graves of war dead with flowers. And so we bring flowers. And around that time, African American soldiers in South Carolina cleared the graves from a POW camp and gave true burial to the soldiers who had helped them gain their freedom. For a while, there was a Confederate Decoration Day observed separately until they were all brought together to be celebrated on this last weekend of May. It's a time set aside to express our gratitude for those many individuals who were willing to give their lives for the well-being of others. And it's a time to be reminded that war is never the goal to aspire to. And the Civil War was certainly an example of how devastating war can be. It was the only official war where all of those who died on both sides were American citizens. Yet we seem to be in an unofficial civil war now, one that we don't know how to get out of. The mass shootings that have been in the news over the last few weeks have focused our attention on what is actually an ongoing public health crisis, a crisis that kills more than 100 people every day. Gun violence is now the leading cause of death for children and teens in America, the leading cause of death. Guns have already killed more than 630 children this year. Americans ages 15 to 19 are 80 times more likely to be shot to death than teenagers in any other developed country. And our fights about gun control versus the Second Amendment have created a political stalemate as we continue to lose 45,000 lives every year to guns. That's 123 lives a day. Doesn't happen in any other country. This week we have seen the faces and the names of the children over and over who have died in the last few weeks, but we don't see or hear 100 names every single day, all through the year, names of those who we have lost. This result of our political paralysis is that if we just start in 1975, more Americans have died from guns than in all of the wars, the United States history, going all the way back to the American Revolution. And we ask why. We ask God why, and we ask ourselves why. And it seems that at the heart of this devastating problem, well, at first is money, the power that money holds, combined with our cultural belief that violence is the most efficient and God-ordained way to resolve our differences. We believe in redemptive violence, and we are afraid to stand up to those with enough wealth to get their way. But we are not the first or the only people to find ourselves trapped by our own beliefs. And I think our story from Acts today highlights this problem and gives us some hope. Because the Apostle Paul believed in violence. He believed that there was right and there was wrong and there was nothing in between. He was totally focused on being right, and everyone who was wrong should be punished to the full extent of the law, including death. He didn't seem to know, well, how wrong or how miserable he was until a vision from God knocked him off his horse, left him injured and blinded and dependent on help from the very people he was trying to kill. He was changed by their gracious care. He was freed from his beliefs to be able to learn to love and to accept love. And so we pick up his story, this story, as he's out with some of his new friends on a trip through Europe, sharing these experiences with everyone he can. And while he is speaking with a group of people, they encounter a slave girl with a strange ability to tell fortunes. And you would think that might be a gift, but that's not how she experiences it. Instead, it's more of a curse. She's being used by the men who own her to make more money for themselves. This woman, like many others in this life, is trapped, captive to something that is beyond her choices. And often when that is the case, individuals are vulnerable to being used and abused by others. This fortune teller's spiritual insight draws her towards Paul and his friends. She knows and names who they are and what they are doing. And she says, "These are servants of the Most High God." And she says it over and over and over. And Paul, getting frustrated and also recognizing the pain of the situation, turns to her and calls out this spirit right there and then. And she is set free. But there will be repercussions, because her owners realize that their investment has been ruined. And the outrage that this woman's owners felt is visible today as well as it was then. If you take on anything that is likely to lead to diminishing returns for investors, you must be wrong, and you will know it. And unfortunately, we seem to have accepted that this is just the way of the world. Everyone and everything is a potential product to be tapped and exploited. But in this story, God's love breaks through. When God's compassion gets into the marketplace, those bearing the good news may become instruments of confrontation. As Christians, we seek to be good citizens, but sometimes to be true to ourselves and be true to our faith, we must stand up for people in ways that authorities will find irritating and will call interfering and problematic. And so Paul and Silas are attacked for practicing this kind of faith. They were beaten with rods for setting someone free who was being used for financial gain. Then they were thrown into prison. And Paul and Silas are in stocks. They are unable to move, and they sing. That's the way of those who are truly free. To be centered in God, living your vocation, enables singing even in the most dire of circumstances. Martin Luther King, the freedom fighters, sang while in jail. Calling on the presence of God is the way that they knew to stay sane in untenable circumstances. And in this case, suddenly there's an earthquake that shakes the foundations of the prison, leaving the doors opened, their chains are loosened, and one would think that their reaction would be to get out of there as quickly as possible or to go for the guards' weapons and fight their way out. But Paul and Silas had compassion even for those who were keeping them in chains. Because according to the Roman law, the Philippian jailer was responsible for all of those prisoners. So when the jailer woke and he saw that the doors were open, he knew in that moment that his life, his work were at stake. Seeing no future for himself, he decided just to commit suicide. But Paul sees him and calls out to him, "Don't harm yourself. We are all still here." Rather than run, they wait. Their compassion for the one that had held them prisoner stops them. This is the compassion that moves beyond our individual desires and our comforts, even the possibility of our individual freedom. And the fact that Paul makes this connection with another human being becomes life-changing for many more people. And I think this is why this story is important. We tend to get sort of stuck on that miraculous element. Like if you believe in miracles, then you might think that the point of this story is that God can cast out spirits and cause earthquakes to open jails. If you're not so sure that miracles that break the law of nature are real, you might just dismiss this story as meaningless. But both approaches miss the point, the deeper meaning in this story. For this story is about changing the way that we live in the world. It's about noticing the pain in the people around us and taking the risk of helping them out of their chains, whatever those chains might be. So Paul offers this enslaved young woman a way out. He stops the jailer from committing suicide. He shows them another way to live in community. The jailer even asks, "How can I be saved?" And we tend to assume we know the meaning of that word. But he may have been asking, "How can I be saved from the Roman soldiers who are about to come and kill me for my irresponsibility?" Or he may have been asking, "How can I be free from this life of fear? I'm afraid of my boss. I'm afraid of losing my job. And here you were in prison, in stocks, and you are more free than I ever was. You were physically set free and you didn't run. I want that. How can I be saved from this life that I'm living?" So this jailer, ready to take his own life, is given hope. Staying together, standing up for each other, new life was possible. And the story speaks to our time as well. As long as we believe that violence is the only way to freedom and that those with the money make the rules, we will never be free from the fear that haunts the halls of our schools and our churches and our synagogues and our grocery stores and our public events. And unfortunately, the NRA and the gun lobbies have for decades used their money to prevent the government from even researching the causes and the results of gun violence. Millions in government money have been spent on researching how to make cars safer in order to save lives on the highway. And almost nothing has been spent on studying just gun safety, because the money is being spent to block it. And we know in our hearts that gun safety is not a hopeless task. Every other country manages to do it better. And the majority of gun owners, when asked, believe that we need some limits. Few people believe that it's okay for a teenager to buy an assault rifle. Nicholas Kristof suggests that we supplement our thoughts and our prayers with a few concrete steps based on evidence gathering, based on hard conversations with people that we disagree with, to reduce gun deaths so that elementary schools do not have to be graveyards. We must find a way to work together to address this country's problem with gun violence and with our ambivalence and neglect of children's education and mental health and physical health care. In a world that is so dependent on fear-invoking violence, it is our turn to show the world, our friends, our neighbors, our families, what it might look like to follow the Prince of Peace. So maybe on this Memorial Day weekend, we express our gratitude for those who have given up their lives in service for the welfare of others. And in their honor, we choose to work together, to stand up to those with the power to make change happen, to care for all of God's children in ways that seek to end this war we are waging within our own borders. As we continue through this weekend, let us remember those who have died in the wars, those who are dying in this war, and let us work together to make peace a possibility.